What's up everybody? Today I'm going to teach you how to varial heel flip in first person. So for this trick, I recommend having two tricks down. One is the front side shove it, and the other is the heel flip. And I have POV trick tips on both of these tricks, so make sure you check those out. So now let me cut it to both regular and goofy so you can see it in both stances. So basically what the varial heel flip is, you're mixing a front side shove it with a heel flip, so that does a front side shove it 180 degrees while also doing a heel flip. So when you mix those together, you should get something like this, and that makes the varial heel flip. I keep toe dragging. So I'll explain better a little later, but you don't really have to have heel flips really crazy, because the flick of the varial heel is almost a little different than a heel flip. Like a heel flip, you kick kind of, you know, forward and out towards that corner. While I think more of the varial heel, I kind of like almost do like a half circle motion, where I'm kind of like going out and around, so it kind of gets a little scoop in there. So like you're scooping, but you're also kind of throwing your front foot with it in that direction too. So if you suck at regular heel flips, don't worry about it. I'm honestly way better at varial heels than regular heel flips. So starting off with the foot position, it's kind of like whichever is most comfortable for you. You just have to experiment. But what helps me the most, right, for my back foot, I like to put in this back pocket here, just so you can get a nice scoop forward, right, when you do the varial heel flip. Sometimes if you have it like centered or like too far in this pocket, you can't get a good front shove scoop. So whatever helps you on your front shoves the most, like for me it's the back pocket, use that. Now for your front foot, this is where it gets controversial. Some people hate on mine a little bit because I like to hang my toe off. You don't have to hang your toe off, but I know like most people do hang their toe off, but just not to my extent. Sometimes they just like to have it where their heel is kind of like at the back of this board here. But I recommend having it there instead of, you know, just like where an ollie you have your toes here. You're not gonna be able to get your back heel to catch the board to do the varial heel flip. So scoot up a little bit, so a little bit of your toes are hanging off. But for me, I like to have my heel kind of like somewhere where my heel is almost in like the middle of the board, so that I can feel like pressure when I press on the board like this. I don't know, it just feels easier for my heel to catch the corner of the board when I flick it that way. Sometimes I'll also either keep my front foot straight like this, or I'll like angle it like my toe towards the tail just a little bit, maybe so like my back heel can catch it easier. So put together, my foot stance kind of looks like this, right? That's kind of like what helps me the most with it. But kind of just like experiment and just see what foot positions help you most, just to kind of form the trick the best. Also forgot to mention, like, I kind of keep it in the middle of the board. You don't want it like too far back here to do a varial heel flip, and you don't want it too far up. You kind of want it like somewhere in the middle, so you can get like a good feel for the corner of the board. So one of the most common mistakes with this is, just like the front shove it and the heel flip, is that the board goes really far behind you like this. So see, a front shove it can go behind you like that, and for the heel flip it can also be like that too. So putting this trick together, it's almost bound to just go behind you like that. That was my main issue when learning it. So the only real way to attack the issue of it going behind you is that most of the time it's going to deal with your posture. So for the front shove, heel flip, varial heel flip, a lot of people tend to lean over their toes the most. So when they end up doing the trick while leaning over their toes, the board just flies behind them. So when you're leaning on the board, like the whole goal is to stand straight up, right? But if you're leaning too far forward, you might think you're standing straight up, but you're not. So really try to like lean back towards your heels, right? So lean back towards your heels this way when you're doing the trick. It's a little uncomfortable. I kind of like act like I'm sitting in a chair behind me. It's like I'll be in this stance, but like I had to like kind of like look up and act like I'm sitting in a chair behind me. That's really the only way to trick yourself into standing straight up. Like you don't necessarily want to jump backwards. It's more of like you want to lean back while you're doing this, so you can stay more over it. So it's going to take some time, but as you're doing this trick, really make sure you put emphasis on leaning back towards your heels and act like you're sitting in a chair behind you, so that when you jump straight up, you'll stay more above it. And it freaking just went behind me, so let me do that again. So make sure you like just lean back. You see, even though I didn't land, I actually stayed over that time. So again, lean back towards your heels and act like you're sitting in a chair behind you. And hopefully that'll make you a little closer to it. The next common mistake will be if you're over flipping it or under flipping it. So if you're over flipping it like this, or if you're under flipping it like this. So starting off with under flipping, it can be kind of like two things. Your front foot might be too high up on the board, where like when you're flicking it, you can't really get like a good you can't really get a good flick. Like, see, it was even hard for me to flick it there. Or you're actually doing it properly, but you're just kind of like stomping down too fast and not jumping high enough in the air. So if you're under flipping because of your foot position, potentially, you know, maybe try some different foot position where you scoot it further back, either towards the middle or maybe even a little further back. Or when you do this trick, really make sure you tuck your knees up in the air so it gets enough time to actually flick. Also, it could be not even because your front foot is like too high up, but it can be like too far back where you can't really get a good flick on it. So really try like putting your toes more out so that you can actually catch the board better with your heel. So just kind of like experiment with what you do with your front foot on it. So just to reiterate, find a comfortable foot position for your front foot and really make sure you tuck your knees when you're jumping in the air so it has enough time to flip. Now for the other way, if you're over flipping, it might be because either your front foot is too high up like this, where your toes are hanging off too much, or maybe like your front foot is too far back where you can get kind of like more of a flick on the edge. Try either scooting it more up this way or more back on the board. So really, again, just try again with those foot positions. And then also maybe because you're like tucking your knees up too high as you do it, right? You're not really catching the board. So really just make sure to experiment with your foot positions, how high you're tucking your knees up, and really just like kind of figure out what works best for you. I keep rolling off this side. So the next common mistake is similar, but it deals with kind of like the scoop. So you might be over scooping it. So it could be doing almost like a laser or something, right? Or you could be under scooping this trick where it's like you don't get the full 180-degree rotation. So if you're over scooping, you can either like put your back foot less in the back pocket, try to like scoop it more towards the center. So instead of having it here, maybe like scoot it up to where you regularly pop. Or you can just keep in your mind not to scoop like as hard. Like don't really scoop it super hard. Maybe like keep your back foot in the back pocket, but just focus on maybe like popping straight down more, so it kind of tricks you to scoop less. So again, this is really experimenting just to see like what foot positions might work best, and like just kind of like the mindset you have when going into this trick for the scoop. Now if you're under scooping, it might be because your back foot is like too far like over the tail where you're not in the back pocket, you're kind of just in the regular shove pocket. Or you could already be in the back pocket, but you're just not scooping hard enough. So if you're under scooping, you know, maybe put your foot more in the back pocket and try to scoop a little bit harder so it actually does the full rotation. Yeah, you really just have to experiment and just, again, like I said before, just see what works best for you when trying this. So next, you might just be like confused on how overall just the trick works. It might just be really confusing to you. So the way that I think about scooping and flicking this trick is that, you know, I have my normal foot position, right? When I scoop kind of like out. It's kind of like hard to explain. Like I have my toe kind of pointing more outwards like this. So when I scoop it like that, it just like kind of throws the tail forward, right? Doesn't necessarily scoop like this. That's kind of like why I have my toe a little angled outwards, so it's kind of like I'm scooping out and around, but I'm not necessarily just scooping like right in front of me like this. Now for my front foot, when I flick almost in a diagonal motion outwards, so it's like this way, right? So I'm not flicking straight in front of me, I'm not flicking straight out this way, I'm kind of flicking diagonally, right? And like I mentioned before, it's almost like a half circular motion that I do. I don't necessarily just go straight out. Sometimes it's kind of like a slightly out and around, so it kind of brings the board around a little bit. So almost like my front foot is helping with the rotation of it a little bit. So it's kind of like out and around. Look at my front foot. It's a weird way to explain it, but that's kind of like how I see it. But if anything, flick like diagonally outwards. Don't just kick straight out or straight out that way. Because the whole goal of this is you want your heel to catch like around this wheel area where the board starts to curve up. So once it catches there, it's kind of like a sweet spot for just throwing it over into the varial heel. So if you look at my feet, you'll see how I scoop and flick the board. It's probably a little shaky up there. And lastly is committing to the trick, or maybe like, you know, you might be jumping too far in front of it like this, or you might just be flinging it out like this. So if you're jumping too far in front of the nose like this, that just means you're leaning too far forward over the nose. So you just want to lean a little more towards the tail. The goal is to stand straight up, but sometimes leaning back towards the tail might help combat that. Vice versa, if you're flicking it outwards, that means you might want to lean a little more over the nose, kind of dip your shoulder over so you can stay more over it that way. But if you can get the rotation and maybe just like keep landing one-footers but just can't commit to it, then that's pretty much all commitment, and there's nothing really I can tell you to do to commit. It's just that you really just have to try and stick it, tuck both your knees in the air and really just jump on it. If anything, you can take it as steps to get closer. So maybe just start off with forming the trick, so just getting it to, you know, just form like that. Next would be to land with like your front foot only. And I wouldn't necessarily land with your back foot only because I think that's just gonna mess you up. So just land with your front foot only if you can. After that, maybe like land with your front foot only, but tuck your back knee more in the air. So you gotta get closer to just jumping in the air with both your knees up. And then maybe just forming the trick while tucking both your knees really high in the air like this. Right? So by that point, you should be really close to landing it. You're just gonna have to get over that mental block and just jump on the board. Easier said than done, but maybe take those steps so you feel a little more comfortable towards actually committing. Okay, so now for some slow motion flips so you can really just analyze how I do the trick. So hopefully that was helpful to you all to learn how to varial heel flip. Make sure you comment down below if you have any questions about the trick, and click to the left right here if you want to see all my POV trick tips.